Hi, this is David Wicks, Director of Instructional Technology at Seattle Pacific University, and today I'm going to talk to you about active lecturing and some of the ways you might use it with your students and using PowerPoint. So we're going to look at active learning. When I define it, we're going to identify some of the techniques involved, describe possible barriers, and discuss tips for actual implementation. I'd like to give special thanks to the University of Minnesota Teaching and Learning Center. Even before open learning was popular, they've been sharing about active learning and active lecturing. So thank you very much to them. What is active lecturing? Well, it's when we're asking students to write, discuss, or be engaged in solving problems as part of the lecture. And it's more than just asking them to take notes. It's important that these activities are focused on higher level thinking skills such as analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. So by note taking, some students may actually be doing that, but many of them are just copying down what they see on the PowerPoint rather than actively engaging in knowledge construction. So by definition, when we're looking at this active learning, active lecturing, it's these instructional activities that involve students doing things and thinking about what they're doing as they're doing it. And it's part of this direct instructional activity. So again, it's more than just them copying down what they're seeing. Why use active lecturing techniques? Well, Michael tells us that when we're comparing it to the conventional lecture, in terms of promoting content mastery, they're very similar, but it's superior in promoting these thinking and writing skills. And it's also important that students prefer this style. So many times in large lecture classes, there's issues with attendance. And so if we have ways to get students to class and a certain type of lecturing will promote that, I think that's a good choice to examine. In terms of some examples, there's the very simple in-class writing where you're giving them some kind of a prompt and they're writing about that. The use of visuals, the use of video, audio, and having them interact with those types of multimedia can be helpful. Even a simple pause in the lecture can allow students to take a breath, consolidate their notes, and to just reflect on what's been going on in the class, possibly ask a question. So that blank screen that you just experienced was not some kind of a technical error. That was an example of me just having a slide built into my PowerPoint presentation where there's a built-in pause. So I might be going along, I might be getting excited about my own content and think that the students are all with me, and if I don't have something like a blank slide, I might just continue to roll along, going through slide after slide after slide. And this is, later we'll talk about, this is one of the things students have a problem with PowerPoint. But if you can just add a few blank slides, every 15 minutes or so in terms of your pacing, it may help to slow you down. And it may help your students to just stop, reflect, and maybe come back to you with some questions. What are some barriers you might encounter? This is an example of what I might do in a face-to-face situation where I have faculty in a workshop, and I would stop at this time and ask them about barriers they might encounter. And this slide is not filled in, so if we hit escape here, we can just see that I have a blank slide, and I'm ready to jump out of the presentation mode of PowerPoint and come back to the editing mode, and actually to make the list as professors are actually sharing with me what they see as barriers. And typically in an active lecturing workshop, there's concerns of once you let the students stop and have discussion, there's always that challenge of getting them back together. There's also just the time factor in general. There's with standards and accreditation issues, there's always possible issues with having to cover so much content to prepare students for the next class or for a standard that must be covered. So these active learning techniques seem to take a lot of time for them. So anyway, I would have asked professors in this activity, when I came to this slide, I would have then showed them this think, pair, share slide. And so individually, I would be asking them to think, what are the barriers? What are the barriers to using active lecturing? And maybe write it down on a piece of paper so that I can see that they're actually thinking about what we're talking about instead of just waiting to get to their partner and find out what they have to say. But then once they've written something down, they turn to their partner and share. And then the partners, one of them will be prepared to share back with the class. And that's where we would return to this slide. I would jump back, hit escape, jump back to the editing mode in PowerPoint, and be prepared to type in the list that, at least several of the suggestions that people were giving me. What are some tips for implementation? I would encourage you to start small. Consider a single activity in a lecture, maybe somewhere in the middle of the lecture, have an active lecturing technique. Be prepared to explain to the students why you're doing this. And in some cases, students may feel that they are there, that's their time to hear you talk about the subject matter, and it isn't. It's a waste of time for them to have to listen to their peers try to explain their understanding of the content. Seek input from peers in your discipline, peers from other discipline about how they're using these techniques, and use a variety of activities. University of Minnesota, again, incredible resource. They provide all sorts of documentation on their website, but here's just a list of active learning, or in the case of incorporate these into your lecture, active lecturing techniques. So there's think, pair, share, question and answers, 1 minute paper free write. The list goes on, and that link's available in this presentation. Then just regularly assess its implementation. Just again, check to see with the students if it's working. If you've taught the class before, see if you're covering the same amount of material. See if you feel like students are understanding it better. Here's an example of a focused listing activity, which would be another one, but this would be a case where we could stop again the PowerPoint. So I would hit escape, and I would ask one side of the room to break into small groups, talk with your neighbor, and come up with some of the advantages of using PowerPoint in your lecturing. And I'd ask the other side of the room to come up with disadvantages for using PowerPoint in the room. And then at some point we'd come back together, and then I would be listing the ones that they've suggested. During this time, I would also be looking around the room, hopefully moving around, seeing what people are writing down, listening to conversations. And when we come back, they may have given me lists such as these that PowerPoint's easy to update. It helps keep me organized. It lets me use multiple forms of media in my presentation. On the disadvantage side, they may said that when I use PowerPoint, I feel like I'm encouraging passive learning because I just run through these slides and I find myself less engaged with the students and more engaged with my PowerPoint. And they also may say something like they feel like they tend to put too much information on their slides and they can just see their students' eyes glazing over as they're confused by all the material that they're sharing. So those are just some ideas for you. Again, I would encourage you to visit the University of Minnesota's website. Just do a Google search for active learning, active lecturing, and you'll find lots of ideas for how you might implement this in your class. If you have any comments or questions for me, I'm at dwicks@spu.edu, or you can find me. My Twitter handle is dwixspu. Have a great day.